I've done a lot of random Craigslist jobs, moving boxes, clearing out garages, delivering stuff people are too lazy to drop off themselves. Some are decent side cash, some are just a waste of time. And then there's this one, which I wish I just ignored. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was scrolling through the gigs section while eating leftover pizza. This ad pops up: need help delivering light furniture. Van provided, easy money. The pay was good for just one trip across town, so I texted the number. This guy, who called himself Mark, replied almost instantly. Said all I had to do was meet him in a parking lot. He handed me the keys to the van. I'd load a couple of small pieces from a storage unit and drive them to an address. He made it sound like I wouldn't even break a sweat. I figured, why not? The meeting spot was one of those massive, half-empty shopping center lots on the edge of town. When I got there, the van was already parked by itself near the far end. No signage on it, just plain white with tinted back windows. I didn't see Mark at first, but then he came walking up from somewhere behind the strip mall. He was maybe late 40s, clean-shaven, baseball cap pulled low, smiling that way people do when they're trying a little too hard to look friendly. He handed me the keys, told me the storage unit was just 10 minutes away, and that the stuff inside was already set near the door for easy loading. I climbed into the driver's seat, tossed my backpack down, and started the engine. That's when I glanced over my shoulder into the back. It was empty, completely stripped bare. No shelves, no boxes, not even a carpet lining the floor. Just cold metal. And then I noticed the shackles. 4 of them bolted right into the van floor, 2 toward the front and 2 near the back doors. They weren't old and rusty either. They looked maintained, like they were still used. I sat there for a second, just staring. The keys were in my hand, the engine running, but something about it felt so wrong I actually thought about getting out and walking away. But then I started overthinking. Maybe the van used to belong to some animal transport company. Maybe they were for securing heavy equipment. My brain was trying to make it normal so I wouldn't feel like an idiot for being spooked. I drove to the storage unit. It was one of those huge warehouse-style complexes with identical roll-up doors and long rows. Mark had given me a gate code, so I punched it in and drove through. Unit 142. The lock was already off, and the door was halfway open. Inside were just 2 things: a small dresser and a coffee table, both covered with a dusty sheet. That was it. No other furniture, no boxes, nothing that looked like someone's actual storage. I loaded them into the van, but the whole time, I kept glancing back at those shackles. Even with the furniture inside, they were just there bolted down like some kind of reminder I shouldn't be in that van. I called Mark to tell him I was heading to the drop-off address, but he didn't pick up. Just sent a text. Bring it to the address. Gate will be open. I'll meet you there. The address was in the outskirts. Lots of empty land, scattered houses far apart. The kind of area where you can scream your lungs out and no one would hear. I pulled up to the property and sure enough, the gate was wide open. Gravel driveway, long and winding, leading to a house I could barely see from the road. Halfway up the drive, my phone buzzed. Another text from Mark. Just drive around to the back. That's when my stomach sank. The house was old but not run down. Curtains drawn, no cars in sight. The backyard was basically a dirt lot with a big metal shed off to one side. I parked, turned off the engine, and waited. No one came out. I got out of the van, the gravel crunching under my boots way too loud in the quiet. Knocked on the back door. Nothing. Walked over to the shed and saw the padlock hanging open, but the door pulled shut. I didn't touch it. After a few minutes of just standing there like an idiot, I decided to unload the furniture and leave it near the shed. I figured I'd text Mark a photo so he knew it was dropped off. When I opened the van's back doors, I noticed something I swear wasn't there before: a length of rope coiled neatly in the corner right next to one of the shackles. That was it for me. I snapped the photo, sent it, and jumped back into the driver's seat. As I turned the van around, I caught movement in my rearview mirror, someone stepping out from behind the shed. It was Mark. He just stood there watching me drive off. No wave, no thanks. Just watching. I didn't stop. I didn't even look back again until I was halfway down the main road. When I finally reached the shopping center where we'd met, I parked the van exactly where I found it, locked the doors, and left the keys on the driver's seat. I didn't text him, didn't call, just walked away. By the time I got home, the original Craigslist ad was gone. His number, when I tried to look it up, was already disconnected. I still think about those shackles, and the rove, and how easy it would have been for him to tell me to load something heavier, or go inside that shed, or help him with something in the back of the van. I've never taken another Craigslist delivery job since. I was cleaning out my closet on a Saturday morning, making a pile of stuff I didn't use anymore. Half of it was clothes I'd forgotten I owned. The rest was random tech from my I'm going to be a hobby photographer phase. Buried under a pile of scarves and old chargers, I found my old DSLR camera. It still looked brand new. I hadn't touched it in years, not since I got a phone with a decent camera, but something in me still hesitated before setting it in the sell pile. I could use the money though. I snapped a few quick pictures of it with my phone, wrote a short Craigslist ad. Canon DSLR, great condition, $200 OBO, and posted it. A couple hours later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. The name at the end was Ely. He said he'd been looking for a camera like mine and asked if it was still available. His messages were short and polite, no weird emojis, no overfamiliar tone. He offered to meet that night and said he'd pay cash. We agreed to meet in the parking lot of a grocery store near my place. Neutral territory. He showed up exactly when he said he would, pulling into a spot a few cars away in a beat-up gray sedan with peeling paint and a dent in the back bumper. He looked mid-30s, wiry, with messy brown hair and a few days of stubble. He stepped out, greeted me with a nod, and examined the camera with a kind of careful precision, checking the buttons and peering through the viewfinder. Then, without even trying to negotiate, he handed me the money. 5 minutes. That's all it was. I drove home thinking how refreshingly simple the whole exchange had been. 2 days later, I noticed a car parked down the street from my building. Same color, same dents, same faded paint as Ely's. I figured it was just coincidence. Plenty of older settings out there. But then I saw it again the next day. And the next. Always in different spots, but never far from my place. Sometimes it would be in the grocery store lot across the street. Sometimes a few blocks over. Always within line of sight of my building. I started trying to catch a glimpse of the driver without making it obvious. One afternoon, as I walked past, I saw him, Eli, sitting behind the wheel, staring straight ahead, not at me, not out the window, just ahead. His hands rested on the steering wheel like he'd been sitting there for a while. He didn't nod, didn't roll down the window, didn't even pretend to check his phone. That night, I replayed the Craigslist meet in my head. I hadn't given him my address. We met in a busy public lot, but it would have been easy for him to follow me home. I tried to remember if I'd noticed a car behind me that night, but nothing came to mind. Over the next week, I saw him more, walking down my street in the late afternoon, standing near the bus stop across from my building. Always alone, always within sight. Maybe he lived nearby, I told myself. Maybe I was just connecting dots that weren't there, but the feeling in my stomach disagreed. One night, I was sitting in bed scrolling on my phone, my lamp casting a warm glow on the wall. My curtains were pulled halfway shut, enough for me to see the glow of the street lamp outside. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. When I turned, my chest tightened. Ely was standing on the sidewalk directly across from my building. Perfectly still, his face was in shadow, but his outline was unmistakable. I'm on the second floor. There's no way he could see me clearly, but that didn't matter. He was looking in my direction, standing there alone like it was the most natural thing in the world. I turned off my lamp and stepped back from the window, my heart pounding in my throat. Hours later, I looked again. He was gone. The next morning, as I opened my door to leave for work, I saw something taped at eye level. A single Polaroid photo. It was of the street outside my building. The angle was from a car window, like whoever took it had been parked across the road. There was nothing written on it, no note, no context, just the image. I peeled it off, shoved it in my pocket, and threw it away at the first trash can I passed. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even know how I would explain it without sounding paranoid. That night, I couldn't settle. Every sound outside, a car door slamming, footsteps on the sidewalk, made me flinch. Around midnight, I started to drift off when I heard it. A faint crunch of gravel right outside my window. I told myself it was someone walking a dog. But then came another sound. A slow, deliberate tap on the glass. I froze. It came again. I slid out of bed, careful not to make the floor creak, and crouched near the door, my phone in my hand. I thought about calling the police, but all I could picture was them showing up, finding nothing, and then him knowing I'd called. The tapping stopped. I stayed like that for a long time, waiting. Eventually, I got back into bed, still holding my phone, listening for any other sound. When morning came, I went to the window. Nothing. No footprints, no marks, no proof that anyone had been there. But I knew. That day I saw his car again, parked 2 blocks away, facing my building. I stopped seeing it after a few weeks. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he moved on to someone else. But sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night certain I heard something outside my window. And I can't shake the feeling that selling him that camera wasn't the real reason he wanted to meet me.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
I've always been a sucker for mystery boxes, not the scammy ones online. I mean the real life kind where someone is selling a bunch of random old electronics for cheap. You never know if you're going to get junk or something you can actually flip for decent money. So when I saw the Craigslist post for box of mixed electronics, $40, I messaged immediately. The photo showed a big cardboard box with tangled cords, remotes, a couple of routers, and what looked like an old camcorder. The description just said, "Cleaning out garage, all or nothing." The seller's name was Steve. He told me to meet him in a supermarket parking lot. When I got there, he was already waiting in the box sitting in the back of his SUV. He was friendly enough, even let me poke through the top layer before I handed over the cash. I figured if I could sell 1 or 2 things from the pile, I'd make my money back. When I got home, I set the box down in my living room and started pulling stuff out. Old DVD players, broken headphones, random power adapters that didn't match anything. Most of it was useless, but at the very bottom was this small black cube-shaped camera. It wasn't like a DSLR or even a point-and-shoot, more like one of those modern security cameras, the kind you stick on a shelf and connect to Wi-Fi. It was heavier than I expected, with a single lens on the front and a small LED light that was glowing faintly red. That gave me pause. I hadn't plugged it in, hadn't charged it, nothing, but the light was on. I turned it over in my hands, looking for a power switch. There wasn't one. Just a small reset button and a port for a charging cable. When I looked back at the lens, the red light blinked once, like it was reacting to me. I set it on the coffee table and went back to the box, but I couldn't stop glancing at it. Something about the way it sat there made my skin crawl. I finally decided to plug it into my laptop to see if I could figure out what it was. The moment it connected, my laptop opened a browser tab automatically. No login screen, no settings menu. It went straight to a live video feed. My heart dropped. It was my living room. Not just the current view from the camera in my hand. It was already showing the room from somewhere else. The angle was high, like from the corner near the ceiling, aimed straight at my couch. I froze, staring at the screen. On the couch was me, sitting there, holding the camera, looking at the laptop. It was like watching myself in real time, except the image felt slightly delayed, maybe a second or 2 behind. I looked up toward where the angle suggested the other camera might be. There was nothing there. No camera, no mount, nothing on the wall. But the feed didn't stop. I unplugged the cube from my laptop, but the red light stayed on. The feed froze on my screen for a moment, then switched to black. A small message popped up in the corner. Connection lost. I sat there in silence for a few minutes, the cube still on the table, glowing red like it was watching. Then my laptop made a sound, a notification ping. The same browser window refreshed. The black screen was gone. The feed was back. Only now the camera was in a different place. It was still my living room, but the angle had changed. This time it was lowered near the ground, looking up toward me, like it was coming from somewhere near the TV stand. I didn't even move at first. I just scanned the room slowly, my eyes darting between every shadow, every object that could hide something. That's when I noticed one of the small vents near the floor was slightly ajar. I don't know what I expected to see when I crawled over, but I definitely didn't expect the faint glint of a lens behind the metal slats. My stomach turned. I grabbed my phone and started taking pictures, but the feed on my laptop cut out again, saying connection lost message. I yanked the vent cover off, and sure enough, there was a tiny black camera wired into the wall. The cord disappeared into the dark space behind it. I went around my apartment checking every vent, every shelf, every spot that could hide something. I found 3 more cameras, one in the corner of my bedroom closet, one behind the books on a shelf, and one under the kitchen counter facing the front door. By the time I finished pulling them all out, my hands were shaking. I dumped them on the coffee table next to the cube. Every single one had the same faint red light, still on, still connected to whoever was watching. I grabbed a blanket and threw it over them. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. A known number. I didn't answer. It buzzed again immediately. Same number. I left the apartment that night with just my wallet and my keys. When I came back the next morning, the cameras were gone. The box of electronics was gone too. Nothing else was touched. The Craigslist post had been deleted. The number I texted to meet Steve was disconnected. I still don't know if he planted them or if they'd been there before I moved in. But sometimes late at night, I'll see the faint glow of a red light reflecting off the edge of my TV screen. I can't find where it's coming from. I was broke, scrolling through Craigslist at 2 in the afternoon, looking for anything that would get me quick cash. I didn't care if it was moving boxes, hauling junk, or standing in a mascot costume, as long as I got paid the same day. That's my solid post. Need help assembling furniture. $120 for 2 hours. Tools provided. It sounded perfect. I'd done my share of IKEA builds and flat pack frustration before. 2 hours for $120 was better than anything else on the page. The ad said the guy had just moved in and needed a couple of heavy items put together before the weekend. I texted the number, and a man replied almost instantly. He said his name was Dan. He'd me an address and asked if I could be there at 6 p.m. The messages were short, polite, and a little clipped. No extra words, just the facts. The building was an older apartment complex tucked into a quiet part of the city. The parking lot had those faded white lines that looked like they'd been repainted half a dozen times, and the air smelled faintly like fried onions from a nearby restaurant. Inside, the hallway was narrow and dim, with walls painted that off-white color landlords love because it hides dirt. When I stepped out of the elevator onto the 4th floor, the place was eerily quiet. No TVs through thin walls, no muffled voices, no doors propped open. Just the hum of the overhead lights. I knocked. Dan opened almost immediately, like he'd been standing right there. Late 40s, average height, jeans, plain black t-shirt. His hair was cut short, his face clean shaven, but there was something in his expression, or maybe the lack of one, that made me uneasy. He didn't smile, just said, right on time, and stepped aside so I could come in. The apartment wasn't what I expected. No towers of cardboard boxes, no scattered piles of clothes, not even a lone coffee mug in the sink. The place was empty, completely. Bare beige carpet, blank walls, no furniture in sight. "Where's the furniture?" I asked. He pointed toward the kitchen. Against the wall were 2 flat-packed boxes, the kind you could carry under one arm. Small enough to be side tables or nightstands, not exactly heavy items. "I've got to grab something from my car," he said. "Go ahead and get started. Tools are in the bag next to the boxes." He slipped out the door without waiting for me to respond. I opened the first box, laying the pieces out on the carpet. That's when I noticed something else. Not only was the apartment empty, it had no signs of anyone living there at all. No keys on the counter, no shoes by the door, no trash can, no mail, no lingering smell of takeout. If you told me the place had never been lived in, I would have believed you. That's when I heard it. A faint, rapid scratching coming from the back of the apartment. It was distant but distinct, a kind of frantic, repetitive scrape, like fingernails or claws against wood. The rhythm was uneven but insistent. My first thought was that he had a pet locked in a room, maybe a dog that didn't like strangers. But there was no barking, no whimpering, just a relentless scrape, scrape, scrape. I tried to ignore it, tightening screws and fitting dowels into place. But then the sound stopped, abruptly. The silence felt heavier than the noise. I glanced toward the short hallway at the far end of the living room. 3 doors, 2 on one side, 1 at the end. The sound had come from that far door. That's when I noticed the padlock. It was drilled into the frame above the knob, thick and solid. The kind of lock you'd use for a storage unit or a shed, not a bedroom. I stared for a moment, my stomach tightening. Who locks a bedroom from the outside? The scratching started again, faster this time. I turned back to my work just as the sound stopped once more, replaced by a muffled thud. Something had pressed or slammed against the door from the other side. That's when the front door opened. Dan walked back in, holding a small paper bag. He moved straight to the kitchen and set it down on the counter. He didn't take anything out. The scratching started again. He froze mid-step, shoulders tensing. He stayed that way for a moment, not looking at me, not looking at the hallway, just listening. Then he turned and said, flatly, "Storage. Ignore it." I nodded quickly and went back to tightening bolts, pretending I didn't care, though my palms felt slick on the screwdriver. He leaned against the counter and watched me. Not helping, not checking the build, just watching. Every so often, he'd take out his phone, glance at the lock screen, then put it back in his pocket, like he was timing something. Halfway through the second table, the scratching came again, but this time it was followed by something worse. A voice. Too muffled to make out words, but definitely human, low, strained. I kept my head down, my pulse pounding in my ears. When I finished, I told him I was done. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a wad of bills, and handed me $120 without counting it. "Thanks," he said. I stepped into the hallway, eager to get out, but before the door shut behind me, the scratching exploded again, faster, harder, almost panicked. And under it, the faint, undeniable sound of someone trying to speak. Dan didn't react. The door clicked shut. I didn't look back. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit for a minute before starting the engine. When I finally pulled away, I checked my rearview mirror over and over, half expecting to see him following me. When I got home, I opened Craigslist to see if the listing was still up. It wasn't. I've tried not to think about it since, but sometimes late at night, I'll remember the rhythm of that scratching and wonder how long it had been going on before I got there, and whether anyone ever opened that door. I'd been broke for weeks. Rent was coming up, my fridge was empty, and I was already behind on bills. I was scrolling Craigslist late one night looking for anything. Day labor, delivery, furniture assembly. Anything that paid cash the same day. That's when I saw it. Help moving boxes. $150 cash. Quick job. Transportation provided. The post said it was a small team, no heavy lifting over 40 elves, and they could pick me up if I didn't have a car. The meeting time was 7 a.m., address given after you confirmed. I texted the number. A guy named Rick replied almost instantly. Said the job was legit, just moving some boxes out of a warehouse before the place changed owners. I figured it was just someone clearing out a rented unit before they stopped paying for it. He told me to meet at a parking lot near an old diner on the east side. When I got there, a white van was parked in the back. Rick was leaning against it, scrolling on his phone. He was mid-40s, stocky, with a baseball cap pulled low. He shook my hand, then told me to hop in. Inside the van were 2 other guys. Both were quiet, sitting with their arms crossed, and neither made eye contact when I got in. We drove about 20 minutes before turning down a road I'd never been on, lined with abandoned buildings and overgrown lots. We stopped in front of what looked like a long-forgotten storage facility. Half the windows broken, paint peeling, a big chain-link fence around it with a gate wide open. Rick hopped out, still checking his phone every few seconds. Inside, the place smelled stale, like damp concrete and dust. There were stacks of boxes in the main room, but they weren't the random cardboard kind you see in storage units. They were all the same size, taped neatly, and each one had a white label on it. At first, I thought the labels were addresses, but when I looked closer, they were just names. First and last names. No return address, no company logo. One stack said Michael Torres, another Anna Lai, another George Peed. There had to be at least 30 boxes in total, all labeled like that. Rick clapped his hands and said we were loading them into the van. No explanation on where they were going. I grabbed one and was surprised at the weight. It wasn't heavy like books or dishes. The weight shifted inside like whatever was in there wasn't packed tightly. The box made a dull thud when I set it down, but not a metallic one. More like, I don't even know, something soft but dense. The other guys worked fast, barely looking at me. Every few minutes, Rick would glance at his phone and then out the front door like he was expecting someone, or watching for someone. At one point, I saw the screen when he tilted it slightly. It wasn't text or social media. It looked like a police scanner app. A little scrolling feed of incident reports and dispatch codes. My stomach tightened. I kept moving boxes, but I couldn't stop thinking about the names. I asked Rick what was in them, trying to keep it casual. He just smiled without looking at me and said, "Don't worry about it. We're almost done." That's when I noticed one of the boxes on the far side of the room was open. The tape had come loose on one end, and the flap was sticking up. I couldn't see much from where I was, just something dark wrapped in plastic. I didn't want to get closer. We finished loading in about an hour. The van was packed tight, every box stacked neatly against the walls. Rick shut the back doors, then stood there for a second, scanning the lot with his eyes. Suddenly, one of the other guys called his name from inside. Rick walked in fast, and I followed without thinking. The other guy was holding his phone up with the scanner app running. I didn't understand the codes, but I heard enough to know they were close. Something about possible burglary and officers en route. Rick swore under his breath and told us to get in the van. My chest went tight. We piled in the boxes stacked behind us like a wall. Rick drove fast, hitting turns sharp, weaving through side streets. Nobody said anything for a while. I kept looking at the boxes that had the neatly printed names, wondering who they were and why Rick kept watching police updates. When we finally stopped, it wasn't at another warehouse or storage facility. It was behind a rundown strip mall, the kind with empty storefronts and cracked pavement. There was a loading dock in the back. Rick and the other two jumped out and started unloading fast. I stayed in the van, pretending to check my phone, but really just trying to decide whether to walk away. The boxes disappeared into one of the empty units, and when the last one was gone, Rick came back over. He handed me the cash in an envelope and said the job was done. I took it, mumbled thanks, and started walking toward the street. He didn't offer me a ride back, and I didn't ask. The whole way home, I couldn't stop thinking about those names on the boxes, and the way Rick kept checking that scanner. That night, I searched a few of the names online. 2 of them came up in local news articles. Both were people who had gone missing in the past year. I shut my laptop and didn't search for the rest. I've been looking for a specific bridesmaid dress for weeks. My friend's wedding was in a month, and the one the bridal shop had in my size was sold out everywhere. Every online store either had it in the wrong color or wanted 3 times the original price. I'd basically given up and was ready to settle for something close enough when I saw a listing on Craigslist. It was the dress. Same designer, same dusty rose color, same size. The photo looked like it had been taken in someone's living room, hanging on the back of a door. The price was way less than I'd seen anywhere else. The description said it had only been worn once, dry cleaned, and was in perfect condition. I texted the seller, and she replied almost immediately. Said her name was Carla and that she was moving soon, so she wanted to get rid of it fast. She asked if I could come by that evening. I figured I'd just grab the dress, hand her the cash, and be done in 5 minutes. She gave me her address, which was in an older neighborhood about 20 minutes from me. It wasn't sketchy, just one of those areas where the houses are a little worn and the porches have mismatched chairs. When I pulled up, her house was the only one on the street with the porch light on. The curtains were drawn, but I could see a warm yellow glow inside. I grabbed the envelope of cash from my passenger seat and went up to knock. The door opened almost immediately, like she'd been standing right behind it. She was older than I expected, maybe mid-50s, wearing a long cardigan. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. She stepped aside and said the dress was inside, and I could try on if I wanted. I almost said I was fine, but she had the door open wide and was gesturing me in. It felt rude to refuse. The living room was small but tidy, with lace doilies on the tables and an old floral couch. The dress was hanging on a hook on the far wall, covered in a clear plastic garment bag. I walked toward it, pulling the zipper down to peek at the fabric. It was perfect. That's when she said it. In this soft, almost dreamy voice, "You look exactly like my sister." I turned toward her, and she was standing much closer than before, blocking part of the doorway. I gave a polite laugh and said something about how that was funny, but she didn't laugh back. She just kept looking at me, her head tilted slightly, eyes fixed like she was memorizing my face. I tried to redirect, saying the dress looked great and I'd take it. I reached into my bag for the envelope, but she shook her head slowly and said I should try it on first, just to be sure. I told her I was fine with the fit, but she stepped forward and put her hand lightly on my arm, guiding me toward a hallway. The touch was gentle, but there was something about it that made my skin crawl. She led me to a small bedroom with a full-length mirror against one wall. The air in there was cooler and it smelled faintly like dust and something sweet, maybe potpourri. She handed me the dress and said she'd wait outside the door. I went along with it, telling myself it was harmless and I'd be out in 2 minutes. I slipped my jacket off and unzipped the dress bag. The zipper on the dress itself was a little stiff, so I stepped into it and pulled it up halfway before deciding that was good enough. I opened the door to show her, but she wasn't in the hallway anymore. I stepped out and called her name. No answer. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of a refrigerator somewhere. I started walking toward the living room, the dress still halfway zipped, when I heard a sharp metallic click behind me. I turned and saw her at the front door, sliding the deadbolt into place. She turned slowly, that same fixed look on her face, and said I should stay a while. My stomach dropped. I told her I really needed to go, that I had somewhere to be, but she just shook her head again and said something about having time to catch up, like we actually were sisters. I took a step toward the door, but she moved to block it. She wasn't tall, but she stood in a way that made it clear she wasn't moving. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. The only other exit I could think of was the back door. I glanced toward the kitchen, trying not to make it obvious, and mumbled something about grabbing my bag from the bedroom. She watched me as I backed toward the hallway. The second I was out of her direct line of sight, I bolted. I didn't go to the bedroom. I went straight through the kitchen, past the fridge, and found a small back door with a flimsy chain lock. My fingers fumbled with it, but it popped free and I yanked the door open. Cold night air hit me as I ran to the yard. It was small, fenced, but the fence was low enough to climb. I didn't look back as I hauled myself over and dropped into the alley behind the house. My knee hit the ground hard, but I kept running until I reached the street where my car was parked. I jumped in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was standing in the front window, the curtains drawn just enough for her face to show through, watching me leave. I didn't take the dress. I didn't even take the cash back out of my bag until I got home. The Craigslist listing was gone by morning. And I still wonder if there ever was a sister, or if she was just waiting for someone who looked like me to walk through her door. I've been trying to sell my bike for a few weeks. It wasn't anything flashy, just a solid mid-range motorcycle I'd taken care of. The paint was still clean. The engine ran smooth, and I kept it serviced regularly. I posted it on Craigslist at a fair price, high enough that I wouldn't feel cheated but low enough to get interest. The responses had been the usual mix. Lowball offers from people who wanted to pay half of what I was asking. Endless. Is this still available? Messages from people who never replied again, and one guy who offered to trade me a set of DJ equipment I had zero use for. Then I got a text from someone named Mark. He said he'd been looking for that exact make and model, cash in hand, and wanted to come see it that afternoon. His messages were polite, short, and he actually used punctuation, which sounds stupid, but after weeks of Craigslist nonsense, it made him stand out. We spoke briefly on the phone. His voice was calm, steady, maybe early 40s. When he showed up, he was right on time. I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway before I saw him. He was wearing a clean black riding jacket, jeans, gloves, and holding a helmet under one arm. Everything about him said experienced rider. No awkward small talk, no weird Craigslist energy. He walked around the bike like he knew exactly what to look for, crouching to check the tires, running his hand along the seat, peering at the chain. He asked if he could take it for a quick test ride. I hesitated. Letting a stranger ride off on something you're selling is always risky, but I'd done it before. Usually I'd hold on to something. Their license, their keys, something that proved they'd come back. Without me even asking, he pulled a wallet from his back pocket and handed it to me. "Just hang on to that until I get back," he said. That simple gesture made me relax. I watched him put his helmet on, swing his leg over the bike, and start it up. The engine purred. He rolled out of the driveway, gave me a casual wave, and disappeared down the street. I figured he'd be gone for 5, maybe 10 minutes. I sat on the porch, listening for the sound of the bike coming back. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I told myself it was fine. Maybe he'd taken it a little further to hit a main road, hit the feel for the acceleration. Maybe he wanted to test it on a stretch without stop signs every 20 feet. At the 15-minute mark, I stood up. By 20 minutes, the easy explanations had dried up. My stomach felt tight. I looked at the wallet still sitting on the porch railing. Something about it felt too light. I opened it. No driver's license, no cash, no credit cards, not even a business card tucked into the slot, just a single folded piece of paper wedged into the billfold. I pulled it out with damp fingers and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "You shouldn't have trusted me." I just stared at the words, my pulse pounding in my ears. The paper felt soft from sweat, and my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I bolted to the curb, scanning the street in both directions. Nothing. No sound, no movement, just the quiet hum of the neighborhood. I grabbed my phone and called the number he'd texted me from. It rang once, then cut to a dead, disconnected tone. That was when the emptiness of the street really hit me. The space in the driveway where my bike had been looked wrong, like a missing tooth in a smile. The more I replayed it in my head, the worse it got. The way he'd been dressed, like a real rider. The confidence in the way he'd handled the bike. Even the little details, showing up exactly on time, giving me what looked like a normal wallet without hesitation. It had all been planned. The wallet wasn't empty by chance. The note wasn't some impulsive joke. This guy had brought that piece of paper with him. It was part of it. I went inside, shut the door, and sat at the kitchen table with the note in front of me. The handwriting was odd, uneven spacing, letters leaning in different directions, but it didn't look rushed. It felt deliberate, like it was meant to stick in my head. I couldn't tell if it was a taunt or a warning. For the rest of the evening, I kept looking out the front window, scanning the corner where the street curved out of sight. A part of me expected, maybe even hoped, he'd come back, that he'd roll in with the same casual wave, maybe say something about just wanting to make a point before handing the bike back. But the street stayed quiet. Later that night, I searched Craigslist again. My listing was still up. When I searched for my bike's make and model, another ad caught my eye. Same color, same year, same mileage right down to the number. The photo showed the bike parked in front of a plain concrete wall I didn't recognize. No people in the frame, no personal details, just the bike. The price was lower than mine, way lower. Low enough that someone desperate for a deal would snatch it up immediately. The timestamp on the ad said it had been posted less than an hour after he left my driveway. I thought about messaging him from another number, pretending to be a buyer. Maybe set up a meeting, catch him in the act. But the more I thought about it, the colder my stomach felt. I had no idea who this guy really was. If he was willing to plan this much just to steal a bike, what else was he capable of? By morning, the ad was gone, so was any trace of the phone number he used. The note's still in my desk drawer. I don't know why I keep it. Maybe because part of me still wants to believe it meant something more than what it said. That there was some reason he chose those words. Or maybe because I'm afraid one day I'll see them again. Somewhere else in someone else's handwriting, and I'll know it wasn't just about the bike. I was scrolling through Craigslist one night, not really looking for anything specific. My apartment needed a few more pieces of furniture, so I was half-heartedly browsing the for sale section, but mostly I was just killing time before bed. That's when I saw it. A big, bright photo of a golden retriever with a red collar. The title is in all caps. Lost D.O.G. Cash Reduard. Something about the picture made me stop. The dog's mouth was open in a pant, tongue hanging out, and his eyes looked warm and trusting. The kind of dog you just assume belongs in the passenger seat of a pickup, head out the window. The description was short but urgent. The dog's name was Max. He'd gone missing 2 days ago and had last been seen near an industrial area a couple of neighborhoods over. The owner promised $300 to anyone who found him or had information. Normally, I don't respond to stuff like that, but $300 was a lot for me at the time, and there was something about the photo, that face, that made me want to help. The ad said to text a number with any leads. I figured it couldn't hurt to send a quick message saying I'd keep an eye out. The guy texted back almost instantly. His reply was overly grateful, like I'd already done something important. He said someone had just messaged him about seeing Max in an alley behind a closed-down grocery store. He was on his way there now, but asked if I could meet him to help call the dog. He likes when the guy rows, so he might come to you easier. That detail made me pause. It felt a little odd, but not crazy. People knew their pets' quirks. Maybe he was just hopeful. I told him I could be there in 20 minutes. He sent me a location pin. It was about 15 minutes away, the kind of area that's busier during the day, but quiet at night. When I pulled up, the grocery store looked exactly as he described, dead and forgotten. The windows were boarded up, the sign above the door faded to almost nothing. The parking lot was cracked with weeds pushing through. 2 cars sat way off in the corner, far from the building. I couldn't tell if they were abandoned or just parked there for some reason. The alley he mentioned was at the far side of the building, lit only by a single streetlight at the end. And even that bulb was flickering like it was on its last legs. I texted him, "Here." He replied right away, coming on further down. He's hiding behind some trash bins. I got out of the car. The air was damp, the kind of chill that sinks into your clothes. My footsteps echoed against the narrow brick walls as I stepped into the alley. It smelled like wet cardboard and motor oil, the kind of smell that clings to the back of your throat. I glanced around as I walked, half expecting to see a flash of golden fur dart out from behind a dumpster. Instead, a man stepped out from behind one. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. His hands stayed in his pockets. He didn't smile. I gave him a polite, nervous smile anyway. "Hi, have you seen?" Before I could finish, another man appeared behind me. I felt my stomach drop. The first man didn't move closer, but the second man did, just a step, enough that I could hear the scrape of his shoes on the concrete behind me. "There's no dog," the first man said. His voice was low even. "You're going to give us everything you've got, and you can walk out of here." I froze. My brain scrambled for something to say, some way to make it less real. "Look," I donned. The man behind me took another step forward. I could feel the space shrinking. My pulse thudded in my ears. "I don't have much," I said finally. "Just my phone, my keys, and a little cash." The first man extended his hand, palm up, like we were doing some kind of polite transaction. I dove into my bag, pulling out the crumpled bills I had, maybe $40, and gave them to him. He didn't even glance at the amount before stuffing them into his jacket. "Phone," he said. I hesitated. That earned me another step from the man behind me. I set the phone down on the ground in front of me. The first man crouched slightly and kicked it toward himself. He slipped it into his pocket without breaking eye contact. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was a faint hiss of wind through the alley and, far away, the muffled rush of a passing car. Then, as slow as he'd appeared, the first man stepped back. He jerked his head toward the mouth of the alley. The second man shifted enough to give me space to pass. I walked fast. My legs felt stiff, but I forced myself not to run. Running would make it real, and I didn't want to see what real meant to them. When I got to my car, I jumped inside and locked the doors immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before getting them into the ignition. I drove several blocks before pulling over. My chest was tight, like I had been holding my breath since I stepped into that alley. The passenger seat next to me was empty, and the image of the golden retriever from the ad came back, sharp and wrong in my head. When I got home, I borrowed my roommate's phone and pulled up Craigslist. The post was gone. The number I texted was already not in service. The next day, I drove past the old grocery store again. The alley looked exactly the same, quiet, empty, as if nothing had happened. I sat there for a few minutes, engine running, watching the shadows between the dumpsters, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. I haven't answered a Craigslist reward ad since, but sometimes late at night I'll be scrolling online and see another lost pet post with a perfect, bright photo. And for a split second before I can stop myself, I'll think, maybe this one's real. And then I remember how quiet that alley was. and how quickly two strangers stepped into it. I've been saving for months. Every extra shift, every side gig, every time I resisted ordering takeout, it all went into my laptop fund. My old one was a dinosaur, batteried, dead, screen flickering, fans wheezing like they were on life support. I'd been watching sales, scrolling secondhand listings every night, waiting for something good to drop into my price range. It felt hopeless. Anything decent was still too expensive, until I saw this listing on Craigslist. Top-end model, latest processor, barely used. Half the normal price. The photos looked like something out of an unboxing video. Sleek laptop, charger neatly coiled, original box in perfect condition. The seller said he was switching to a desktop and wanted a quick sale. I must have read the post 3 times before messaging him. It felt too good to be true, but I told myself people sometimes just needed fast cash. He replied within minutes, said it was still available, and I could come by that evening to take a look. The address he gave me was in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city, not the kind of place I usually associate with scams or shady deals. That, I told myself, was a good sign. When I pulled up, the street was calm. Rows of small older houses, most with their curtains drawn against the early winter darkness. A few porch lights glowed in the distance. The address he'd given me was a single-story house with peeling paint and a dim porch light buzzing overhead. I knocked. The door opened just enough for me to see him. Mid-30s, tall, hoodie pulled up. His expression was unreadable, just a quick nod before he stepped back. "Laptop's inside on the table," he said. "You can check out before paying." I stepped in, and the door clicked shut behind me. It wasn't just a soft push. I heard the metallic scrape of a deadbolt sliding into place. The living room was dim, lit by a single lamp in the corner. Shadows pooled in the corners, swallowing most of the details. The coffee table in the middle had the laptop on it, lid closed. The charger and box were beside it, identical to the photos in the listing. I told myself the locked door meant nothing. Maybe he was just the kind of person who locked up immediately. Still, that sound stuck in my head. He stood near the doorway to what looked like a kitchen, hands in his hoodie pocket, watching as I sat down on the couch. I flipped open the laptop. It powered on instantly, screen bright and clean. No scratches, no fingerprints. The specs in the system settings matched the ad exactly. For a brief moment, my suspicion eased. Then I noticed there was no Wi-Fi network showing. I mentioned it, and he said the router was in another room. "I'll grab it so you can test it," he said, disappearing down a hallway. That's when I saw a lock again. Heavy, brass, and keyed only from the inside. My stomach knotted. From somewhere deeper in the house, I heard movement, but it wasn't coming from the hallway he'd gone down. The sound was faint but distinct, slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone trying not to be heard. I kept my eyes on the laptop, pretending to be absorbed in it, but my ears were straining. The steps grew closer, stopping just beyond the doorway to my left. The air seemed thicker, like the room itself was holding its breath. The man came back, no router in his hands. Instead, he stood by the coffee table again, his hoodie pockets still occupied. There was a half smile on his face now, but it didn't reach his eyes. From my peripheral vision, and I saw it, a second man stepping partway into the room from the side doorway. Older, wearing a dark jacket. He didn't speak, didn't move any closer, just watched. I realized then the couch I was sitting on had been positioned so that both men were between me and the only exit. The laptop felt heavier in my lap, even though I wasn't holding it anymore. My hands rested on my knees, but they were tense, ready. My heart was pounding hard enough that I was sure they could see it in my chest. "You should test the keyboard and the ports," the first man said. His tone was slower now, deliberate in a way that set off every alarm in my head. I picked up the laptop just to keep my hands busy, asking if he had the original receipt or proof of purchase. The pause before he answered wasn't long, but it was long enough for my mind to start screaming at me to leave. I set the laptop back on the table. "I'll just grab my wallet from my car," I said, standing as casually as I could. Neither man moved, but their eyes followed me the whole way to the door. I tried the handle locked. I turned to him, feigning a small, almost sheepish smile. "Could you unlock it for me?" He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the key. It turned in the deadbolt with a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. The cold air outside hit me like a slap. I stepped out, muttered a quick thanks, and walked to my car without looking back. My fingers fumbled with the handle before I got the door open. Once inside, I locked it instantly and started the engine. Only when I was pulling away did I glance in the rearview mirror. Both of them were standing in the doorway, framed by the dim light inside, watching me go. When I got home, I checked the Craigslist listing. It was gone. I tried calling the number. Disconnected. I sat in my kitchen for a long time, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator, replaying every detail. The lock. The second set of footsteps. The way the couch had been positioned. And the fact that if I'd ignored my instincts for even a few more minutes, I might not have walked back out that door at all. I needed a place fast. My lease had ended and my roommate bailed, so I was crashing at my cousin's place, sleeping on his couch with my stuff piled in boxes against the wall. I went on Craigslist every day, scrolling past overpriced studios and weird shared living situations, until I found one that seemed doable. It was a sublet, month-to-month furnished room, utilities included. The price was better than anything else I'd seen, and the photos showed a clean, older house with a small front porch and a yard. The ad set was run by a quiet, respectful older woman looking for someone similar. I called, and she picked up right away. Her voice was calm, slow, like she weighed every word before saying it. She said the room was still available and asked if I could come that afternoon. The house looked even neater in person. The lawn was trimmed, the curtains all matched, and the paint didn't have a single chip. She answered the door in a cardigan, hair perfectly combed, smiling politely but not warmly. Inside, it smelled faintly like tea and something floral. She walked me through the place, the kitchen, the bathroom, the small dining area, and then to the room I'd be renting. It had a bed, dresser, and a little desk. While she was going over the rent, she added one thing that stuck with me. She said I could use the whole house except for the basement. Her tone didn't change, but her eyes stayed on me longer than before. She said the basement was off limits and that she kept it locked. No explanation, just that. I didn't push it. It was cheap and I needed a place now. I moved in 2 days later. The first week was normal. She kept to herself, mostly stayed in her room or sat in the living room reading. We'd pass each other in the kitchen and exchange polite small talk. At night, the house was silent. The kind of silence where you can hear the clock ticking in the hall. About a week in, she mentioned she'd be going out of town for a few days to visit her sister. She said she'd leave early in the morning and be back by Friday. She reminded me about the basement again, told me she'd be locking it before she left and not to worry about anything down there. The morning she left, I watched from my window as she loaded a small suitcase into her car and drove off. The house felt different immediately, like the air shifted. I had the place to myself, which was nice at first. That night, I stayed up late watching TV in my room. Around 1 a.m., I turned everything off and was scrolling on my phone in bed when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, a faint creak from below. But then it came again, followed by something else. It sounded like voices. Low, muffled, but definitely voices. I sat up, holding my breath. The sound was coming from directly below me, which meant the basement. I tried to tell myself it could be a radio or an old TV down there, but it didn't sound like that. The rhythm of it was too uneven, like an actual conversation. I got out of bed and went into the hallway. The house was dark, except for the little nightlight by the bathroom. I stood at the top of the stairs that led down to the kitchen, listening. The voices stopped. I told myself it was nothing and went back to my room. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next night, it happened again. This time it started earlier, maybe around 11:30. Same low, muffled tone, like several people talking. I couldn't make out words, just the sound of it. Every once in a while, I'd hear something else, a scrape like metal on concrete. I wanted to check if the basement door was actually locked, so I went down to the kitchen. The door was at the far end, past the pantry. It was closed with a deadbolt above the knob. I tried it gently. It didn't move. That should have been enough to reassure me, but standing there in the kitchen, I could hear the voices more clearly. I could feel them under my feet, this faint vibration through the floor, like something heavy was moving. I backed away and went upstairs without looking back. By the third night, I wasn't sleeping much. I'd lie in bed, waiting for it to start. And it did, right on time like clockwork. Except this time, there was something new. A sound that cut through the muffled talking. A sudden, sharp bang. Then another. Then a dragging noise that went on for way too long. I stayed in bed, frozen, staring at the dark ceiling. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't want to be anywhere near that door. The morning of the day she was supposed to come back, I went into the kitchen to make coffee. The basement door was still locked, but something was different. The deadbolt was turned the other way, unlocked. I stood there staring at it, my coffee forgotten. I knew I hadn't touched it. My stomach twisted, and I decided to spend the rest of the day out of the house. That evening, I came back just as she was pulling into the driveway. She got out, smiling politely like always, but her eyes flicked past me toward the house like she was checking something. I went up to my room as she carried her suitcase inside. I could hear her moving around downstairs for a long time. At one point, I heard the basement door open. It stayed open for several minutes before closing again. I didn't hear any voices that night, and I never asked about the basement. I should have just ignored the listing. I've been hunting for this one specific car part for weeks. Not just something I wanted, something I needed. The replacement cost from the dealership was insane, and even the secondhand shops in town were charging nearly triple the normal price. I checked forums, Facebook groups, even eBay, and still came off empty. Then one night, I stumbled across a Craigslist post that seemed like an answer to prayer. Someone was selling the exact part, lightly used, for dirt cheap. The ad had a single photo, the part sitting on a concrete floor, shadows creeping around it. No background, no sense of scale. The description was barely 2 sentences long, ending the phone number. It was vague, but the price was too good to ignore. I texted the number right away, thinking I'd suggest meeting somewhere public, maybe in daylight. The reply came within minutes. Yeah, still have it. You can come get it tonight. I told him I worked early the next morning and asked if we could do it the following day. He said no. He worked late nights, and this was the only time he was available. If I couldn't make it, he'd just sell it to someone else. I hesitated. Every common sense warning light in my head was flashing. But then I thought about how rare it was to even find this part at all, and how much money I'd save. That's how he convinced me. He sent an address, an industrial park on the far edge of town. Said to meet him in the parking lot and text when I arrived. I told myself it was fine. Maybe he was a mechanic working night shifts. Maybe he just didn't want to drive somewhere else. I came up with a dozen justifications, each one shakier than the last. By the time I left my place, it was 1:30 a.m. The streets were quiet and mostly empty. I passed the occasional semi-truck, its headlights cutting through the dark like ghostly search beams. The further I got from downtown, the fewer streetlights there were, until I was driving through stretches of black road with only my high beams to keep me company. The industrial park was a cluster of low warehouses and loading docks, surrounded by chain-link fences topped with coils of rusted barbed wire. Most of the windows were dark, and the only sounds were the low hum of distant transformers and the occasional rattle of loose metal in the wind. I turned into the lot from the address he'd given me. The place was dead quiet. A few dim streetlights cast pale orange circles onto the cracked asphalt. Weeds grew through the broken pavement. The lot itself was wide and empty, wedged between two massive windowless warehouses. No other cars, no movement. I pulled into the center of the lot, left my engine running, and texted him. Here. No reply. I waited, checked my mirrors. My headlights lit up the dull metal siding of the warehouse to my right, making the shadows seem even deeper. 5 minutes passed. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel. That's when I saw the first movement. A man stepped out from the far corner of the lot, emerging from the shadows between the buildings. He started walking toward my car, slow and steady. He wasn't carrying anything. No box, no bag, nothing that could possibly be the part I was here for. He stopped about 20 feet away and just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching me. Before I could decide what to do, I caught movement in my side mirror. Another man, coming from the opposite side of the lot. Then another, stepping out from between two dumpsters behind me. My chest tightened. They weren't talking. They weren't smiling. They weren't asking me anything. They were just spreading out. A fourth man appeared from behind the warehouse to my right, each of them dressed in dark clothing, their faces partially shadowed. My eyes darted between the mirrors, tracking them. They weren't trying to hide what they were doing. They were circling me. The first man stepped into my headlights for a brief second, his face completely blank, no reaction to the light hitting him. He moved out of the beam again and kept coming toward the driver's side. Another man got close enough that I could hear the scrape of gravel under his shoes. He wasn't even looking directly at me. He was scanning the space around my car like they were calculating angles. Then my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was from the seller's number. "Stay in the car. Don't leave yet." Something in me snapped. That wasn't a request. That was a command. I slammed the gear shift into reverse. The tires squealed as I backed up hard, my headlights swinging wildly across the cracked pavement. I cranked the wheel and whipped the car around, narrowly missing the man closest to my bumper. He jumped back but didn't shout, didn't chase me. I floored it toward the lot's exit. My rear view mirror showed them still standing there in their positions, silhouettes frozen under the orange glow of the streetlights, watching me go. I didn't slow down until I was back on the main road. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely keep my grip on the wheel. I drove several blocks before pulling over under the one working streetlight I could find. My phone was still in the cup holder. I unlocked it, but the conversation with the seller was gone, completely erased. When I tried calling the number, I got a flat, mechanical voice. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Later that morning, I checked Craigslist to see if the post was still there. Nothing. Not even the cash version. It was like it had never existed. And I still don't know if there ever was a car part, or if the whole point had been to get me in that lot at that time in the first place. I'd just moved into a new place and needed furniture, but my budget was basically zero. I was living off instant noodles and whatever change I could dig out of my car, so buying something nice wasn't happening. Craigslist was my go-to for freebies. People are always giving away old couches, tables, and random stuff if you're willing to pick it up yourself. That's how I found it. The post was simple. Free couch. Good condition. First come, first served. The picture showed a decent-looking beige couch, nothing fancy but way better than the camping chair I'd been sitting on for 2 weeks. The only detail in the ad said it was kept in storage and to text the owner for pickup details. I messaged right away, and the reply came quick. The guy said I'd become that evening. He sent an address that turned out to be a self-storage place on the edge of town. I figured it made sense. People store furniture all the time. When I got there, the parking lot was half empty, and the office was closed for the day. The storage units were behind a big metal gate, which was open just enough for a car to squeeze through. I pulled in slowly, my tires crunching over gravel. The units were lined up in long rows, the kind with roll-up metal doors. It was quiet except for the faint hum of a streetlight way at the end of the lot. I parked near the number he'd given me, Unit 47, and texted that I was there. A minute later, a man came around the corner. Mid-40s maybe, wearing a dark hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low. He didn't smile, didn't say much, just waved me over and unlocked the unit. Inside, it was dim and smelled faintly like dust and something stale, like old carpet that had been shut away too long. The couch was pushed toward the back, and a few random boxes were stacked around it. He said it was heavy and asked if I could help slide it toward the door so I could load it into my car. I stepped inside without thinking too much about it. The concrete floor was cold under my shoes, and my voice echoed slightly when I made a comment about the couch being bigger than it looked in the picture. He didn't laugh or reply, just bent down to grab one end. The second I touched the other end, I realized the couch was oddly heavy, like way heavier than a normal couch should be. It didn't even budge when we tried to lift it. I figured maybe the storage unit floor was uneven or the legs were catching on something. I stepped further inside to check, crouching a little to see if there was anything underneath. That's when I heard the sound, the slow, rattling pull of the metal door sliding down behind me. It wasn't slammed, it wasn't fast, just this steady final roll as the daylight started shrinking in the doorway. I turned around so fast I almost tripped, but by the time I was upright, the door was already almost shut. The guy was standing on the other side, his face partially hidden under the cap. The last strip of light narrowed to nothing as the latch clicked into place. Inside, it went dark instantly. I could smell the stale air more strongly now, mixed with something else. Faint, damp, and sour. My heart started pounding in my ears. I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, asking what he was doing. No answer, just silence. I could hear faint movement outside, maybe footsteps on gravel, then nothing. The walls of the unit felt like they were closing in. I groped around for my phone, but there was no signal inside. My flashlight barely lit more than a few feet in front of me, and the beam caught on the couch again. I could see the seams had been split slightly at one edge, like the fabric had been cut and sewn back up. That heavy feeling in my stomach got worse. I didn't want to know what was inside it. I moved toward the door, feeling along the inside for some kind of release latch, but these types of units don't have one. From the inside, it's just smooth metal. I tried pushing, banging on it, but it didn't budge. Then I heard something. Not from outside, from behind me. A faint, driving sound like fabric brushing against the concrete. I froze, listening. It came again, just a little closer. I turned my flashlight toward the couch, but it was still sitting where it was, shadows pooling around it. I didn't care what it was anymore. I just wanted out. I started kicking the door as hard as I could, yelling. My voice echoed down the row of units, but there was no response. My leg was starting to ache from the kicks when I finally heard a noise outside, the sound of metal scraping. The latch clicked again, and the door rolled up a few feet. I didn't wait. I ducked under before it was even halfway open, my shoulder scraping the metal. I stumbled into the cold night air, looking around for the guy. He was gone. The gravel path between the rows was empty. My car was still there, engine off, doors locked, but the space around Unit 47 was dead quiet. I didn't look back inside. I just sprinted to my car, threw it into gear, and drove out through the gap in the gate. In my rear-view mirror, the rows of dark units slid past, the open mouth of 47 disappearing into shadow. When I got home, I pulled up Craigslist to find the post. It was already gone. And now I keep thinking about that couch, how heavy it was, how the seams didn't match, and how it's still sitting there in the dark. I've been looking for a freezer for months. Not one of those small ones that barely fit a bag of ice, but a big chest freezer, something I could load up with bulk groceries and not have to think about it for a while. New ones were too expensive, so I figured I'd try Craigslist. After scrolling through a bunch of overpriced junk, I found one that caught my attention. It was a big old commercial freezer, the kind you'd see in the back of a restaurant. The ad said, "Works fine. Pick up today, $50." The photos were taken outside in someone's yard, weeds growing up around it. The thing looked worn but solid. For $50, I wasn't going to complain. I texted the number in the ad, and the guy responded almost immediately. He said I could come by in the afternoon, and that the freezer was already unplugged and ready to go. I asked if it was heavy, and he just said, "Yeah, bring help." The place was about 40 minutes out of town. As I got closer, the houses got further apart, and the yards got more overgrown. When I pulled into the driveway, the freezer was right there in the side yard, sitting on a patch of dead grass. The guy came out of the house, older, scruffy beard, wearing a faded work shirt. He didn't say much, just waved me over and pointed at the freezer. Up close, it looked older than I thought. The paint was chipped, the lid had scratches, and the seal around the edge was cracked in a few places. But it didn't smell bad or anything, so I figured it was fine. I tried to lift one end, and yeah, it was heavy, way heavier than I expected. I joked about it maybe having something inside, but the guy didn't laugh. He just said, "It's all yours now," and helped me get it into the back of my truck. He didn't even count the money, just shoved it in his pocket and walked back inside. On the drive home, I kept thinking about how heavy it had felt. Even for an old freezer, it was a lot. When I got home, I backed the truck up to my garage and wrestled the thing inside. My plan was to clean it out before plugging it in. I unlatched the lid, expecting maybe some ice buildup or old shelves inside. But the lid barely moved. It was like something inside was wedged up against it. I had to put my shoulder into it to force it open. That's when I saw it. Inside, taking up almost the whole space, was something wrapped in thick black plastic. The plastic was wound tight and sealed with layers of duct tape. It was lumpy, irregular in shape, and immediately I knew this wasn't normal. I touched it, and it was cold, not frozen, but still chilled from however long it had been plugged in before. When I pushed on it, it didn't give much. It was solid, heavy. For a few minutes, I just stood there staring at it, trying to figure out what it could be. Meat? Equipment? Junk metal? I thought about cutting it open right then, but something in the back of my head told me not to. Instead, I grabbed a flashlight and looked deeper inside. The plastic was scuffed in some places, like it had been dragged or moved around before being sealed in there. One corner of the wrapping was torn just enough that I could see another layer beneath. Thick, clobby plastic, the kind used to line trash cans. My stomach started turning. I stepped back and just stared at it again, noticing how the freezer walls had faint smudges and scratches that didn't look like normal wear. The more I thought about the guy's behavior, the way he didn't want to talk, how fast he wanted it gone, how he didn't even check the cash, the worse it felt. He hadn't emptied it before selling it. He hadn't cared what was inside. I decided to see just how heavy it really was. I had a friend to help me try to lift it out. It took both of us straining just to get it up a few inches. Whatever was in there, it wasn't light. It felt like trying to move a person. That was when I told him to drop it. We both backed away, breathing hard. I didn't say what I was thinking, but I could tell he was thinking the same thing. I went inside, grabbed my phone, and pulled up the Craigslist ad again. Gone. The number I'd texted, disconnected. No name, no way to trace it. The freezer was still sitting there in my garage, the wrapped shape inside like a silent weight in the room. I couldn't bring myself to open it. I couldn't just throw it away either. It felt like whatever was in there wasn't supposed to be found, or maybe it was never supposed to leave that yard. That night, every sound from the garage made me tense up. The freezer made little clicks as the metal cooled, and each one made me think about that black plastic shifting inside. It's still there now. I haven't plugged it in. I haven't opened it. And every time I walk past it, I swear it feels heavier. I've been looking for quick ways to make some extra money for the weekend. My usual coffee shop shifts weren't cutting it, so I went scrolling through Craigslist under gigs. Most of it was sketchy or just flat-out scams, but one ad caught my eye. It was simple. Last-minute babysitter needed tonight. Could pay. Cash at the end of the night. No extra fluff. No weird requirements. It had a phone number and a note saying, "Need someone reliable, message for address." I texted right away, and the person replied almost instantly, thanking me for stepping in so last minute. They sent the address, told me to be there at 7, and said they'd go over details in person. It was on the edge of town, in one of those neighborhoods where the houses are far apart, and the streetlights are just scattered here and there. The drive out felt longer than it should have. My GPS kept cutting out, so I was relying on screenshots of the directions I took before leaving. It was just past sunset when I pulled up. The sky still a little blue, but fading fast. The house was big, 2 stories, dark gray siding, with just one dim light on by the front porch. I walked up and knocked. No answer. I tried the doorbell. Nothing. I texted the number I had been messaging, letting them know I was outside. After a minute, the porch light flicked off. I froze for a second, thinking maybe it was just a glitch, but then I heard the click of the front door unlocking. I pushed it open slowly and called out. The air inside was cold, like the heat hadn't been out all day. The place was quiet. Too quiet. There was no sign of a kid, no toys, no TV playing cartoons in the background, nothing. The living room was neat, but in that weird way where it doesn't look lived in. A couch, a coffee table, empty bookshelves. No pictures on the walls. I kept calling out, saying I was there for the babysitting job, but my voice just echoed. Something about the way the sound carried made me uneasy. I stepped further in, thinking maybe they were in the kitchen, but the kitchen was empty too. There were no dishes, no food on the counters, not even a fridge magnet. It looked like a staged house that no one actually lived in. I decided to wait a few minutes in case they were upstairs putting the kid to bed or something. I sat on the couch and checked my phone, but had no signal. That's when I noticed something weird. The front door had locked itself. I got up and tried the handle. Nothing. I jiggled it a few times, but it wouldn't budge. That was when the sound started. Faint footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate, one after the other. The upstairs floor creaked like the weight was shifting from room to room. I thought maybe it was a kid, so I called out again, asking where the parents were. No answer. The footsteps stopped. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do. That's when the light in the upstairs hallway flicked on by itself. It wasn't a slow dimmer kind of light. It was sudden, like someone had just flipped the switch. I could see the glow spilling down the stairs, but I couldn't see who was up there. I backed toward the front of the house, keeping my eyes on the staircase. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I tried the door again, harder this time, but it still wouldn't open. I thought about running to the back, so I moved quickly through the kitchen toward what I assumed was the back door. It was locked, too. Every window I tried was sealed tight, the kind with a latch that clicks into place from the inside, except every single one was already latched. The upstairs floor creaked again. Whoever was up there was moving toward the top of the stairs now. I couldn't take my eyes off the shadow that stretched just beyond the light. It shifted slightly, like whoever it was had stepped forward, but hadn't started coming down yet. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran to the laundry room and found a side door that led to the garage. The garage smelled damp and was almost completely dark except for the faint glow coming through the windows in the garage door. I yanked on the release cord for the garage door opener and shoved the door upward. It groaned loudly, the kind of noise you know can be heard through the whole house. I ducked under and ran to my car. My hands were shaking so badly that I fumbled with the keys, dropping them once before finally getting the door open. I started the engine and tore down the driveway without looking back. When I hit the main road, my phone lit up with service again. I had a new text from the number that had given me the job. It just said, "Thanks for coming by. Maybe next time you'll stay." I blocked the number without replying. When I checked Craigslist later that night, the ad was already gone. And I still don't know if there was ever a kid in that house at all. I'd been hunting for a quiet place to get away for a couple of weeks, just somewhere cheap out of the city, where I could clear my head. Hotels were overpriced, Airbnbs were booked, so I went digging through Craigslist. Most of the cabins were just glorified sheds or trailers in someone's backyard. But then I found one that looked perfect. Small wooden cabin surrounded by trees right next to a lake. The photos looked almost too nice for the price, but the ad was short, no cheesy sales pitch, just a phone number. I called, and the guy on the other end sounded older, kind of gruff. He said the cabin was available cash only and gave me directions. No address, just landmarks to look for along a back road. That should have been my first red flag, but I told myself he was just old-fashioned. It was about a 2-hour drive from where I lived. The roads got narrower the further I went, cracked pavement turning to gravel, then to dirt. No cell service. The only signs of life were the occasional rusted-out pickups sitting in overgrown driveways. I finally saw the old gas station with a broken sign he'd told me to look for, and a little path branching off into the woods. I drove down it, my car bouncing over potholes until it opened up into a clearing. The cabin was there, smaller than the photos made it look, but still decent. A man was standing on the porch, hands stuffed into the pockets of a faded flannel shirt. I parked and got out, thinking I'd just hand him the money and unload my stuff. He didn't say hello. He didn't even look at me at first, just looked at my car, slowly walking around it like he was inspecting it. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. "Your car's too new. We don't trust outsiders with that much money." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, but his face didn't change. He walked closer, stopping just a few feet from me. He smelled like old cigarettes and motor oil. I said I could leave if it was a problem, but he shook his head. Not in a don't worry about it way, more like he was telling me that wasn't an option. The air felt different all of a sudden, heavy. Still, I could hear water dripping somewhere behind the cabin and the faint buzz of flies near the tree line. I glanced back at my car, thinking I could just get in and go, but he stepped slightly to the side, enough to make it clear I'd have to walk past him to get to it. And the way he was looking at me, not angry, not even suspicious, just flat like he was deciding something in his head. He told me to grab my stuff and come inside so we can talk. My hands felt weirdly stiff as I reached in the back seat for my bag. The whole time I was thinking about the fact that no one knew I was here, that I didn't even have an exact address, and that my phone had been on no service for the last half hour. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of mildew and something metallic. There was one small window in the main room, covered with a curtain that didn't quite fit. The furniture looked like it had been dragged in from a thrift store. Mismatched chairs, a sagging couch, a coffee table with deep scratches in the wood. He sat down at the table and gestured for me to do the same. I didn't want to, but I also didn't want to find out what would happen if I refused. My mind was racing trying to think of excuses to leave. I told him maybe I'd come back another time when I had an older car, trying to make it sound lighthearted. He didn't smile. He leaned back in the chair, staring at me like he was trying to figure out if I was lying about something. Then I heard footsteps outside, not from the front porch, from the side of the cabin. Another man appeared in the doorway without knocking. He was taller, broader, wearing a dirty cap and holding a mug. He didn't say anything, just looked at me and then at the first guy. They exchanged some sort of silent nod, and my stomach twisted. The second guy leaned against the wall by the door, blocking the exit without making it look obvious. The first guy kept asking me questions that had nothing to do with renting a cabin, how far I'd driven, if I told anyone where I was going, how much cash I had on me. I lied through my teeth, trying to make it sound like someone was expecting me soon. He finally stood up, saying he needed to show me something out back. I followed because I didn't know what else to do. Out back was just more trees, a patch of muddy ground, and a shed with a warped door. He didn't open the shed, just stood there, watching me. The second guy had followed us out and was now standing a few feet behind me. It hit me then how easily I could just disappear out here. No one would know where to start looking. I told them I needed to grab my phone from my car to check something before I committed to staying. I walked back toward the front, my pace steady, my breathing shallow. The second guy followed, but when I got close enough to the driver's side, I hit the unlock button and slid in fast, slamming the door. I started the engine and threw it into reverse before either of them could get close enough to grab the handle. Gravel sprayed behind me as I backed down the path, my hands gripping the wheels so hard they hurt. I didn't look in the mirror until I hit the main road, and when I did, I saw them standing at the edge of the clearing, just watching. I didn't stop driving until I hit a part of the highway with cell service. I pulled over and just sat there for a few minutes, my whole body tense. The ad was gone from Craigslist by the time I checked. And I still don't know if that cabin was ever really for rent. I've been looking for some cheap furniture for my new place. I didn't want to spend a lot, but I wanted something that didn't look like it came from the clearance section of a big box store. Craigslist felt like the easiest way to find something unique without breaking my budget. I came across this ad for a vintage wooden dresser. The photos looked nice. Dark wood, curved handles, that heavy solid kind of furniture you can't get anymore unless you pay a fortune. The price was low enough to make me suspicious, but the description said they were downsizing and just needed it gone. I messaged the seller and set up a time to pick it up. The guy who answered the door was older, maybe mid-60s, wiry, with that kind of posture like you worked with his hands his whole life. He barely talked, just nodded and led me to the garage where the dresser was sitting. It looked exactly like the photos, maybe even better in person. A little dusty, but no major scratches. I paid him in cash, and he helped me load it into the back of my friend's truck. He didn't make small talk, didn't ask where it was going, nothing. The whole thing felt quick, almost like he didn't want me there longer than necessary. Back at my place, I set it against the wall in my bedroom. I started cleaning it, pulling out the drawers to wipe them down. That's when I noticed something weird with the bottom one. It didn't slide out as smoothly as the others. It caught about halfway like it was hitting something. I figured maybe it was warped from age, so I gave it a harder tug. The drawer came out, but it was shorter than it should have been. There was still space inside the dresser behind where the back of the drawer ended. I stuck my hand in and felt a thin piece of wood. It wasn't the back of the dresser. It moved slightly when I pushed on it. I pulled the drawer completely out and shined my phone flashlight inside. The back was actually a false panel. It had tiny nails on the sides, but the wood was thin enough that I could pry it loose with a butter knife. It popped forward with a little crack of splintering wood. Behind it was a narrow compartment stuffed with papers. At first, I thought maybe it was just old receipts or letters, but when I pulled them out, my stomach turned. There were photographs, dozens of them. They were all printed on cheap glossy paper, the kind you get from a drugstore photo counter. Some were faded, others looked newer. Every single one was of a woman. Different ages, different backgrounds, but all the photos had the same strange, candid feel, like they didn't know they were being photographed. Some looked like they were taken from far away with a zoom lens, others were closer, almost like the photographer was right there with them. I sat on my bed going through them one by one. There was no writing on the back, no dates, nothing that explained why they were here. And then I noticed something else. A few of the faces looked familiar. Not like I knew them personally, but like I'd seen them before. I grabbed my laptop and started searching online. It didn't take long. The first one I found was from a local news article, a missing person case from 5 years ago, and another, and another. The more I searched, the worse it got. These weren't just random women. They were all missing. I pushed the stack of photos away like they were going to burn my hands. My head felt light, like the room was tilting. I didn't know if I should call someone right then or try to pretend I never saw them. The dresser was sitting there, heavy and solid, like it had been keeping this secret for years. I kept thinking about the man who sold it to me, the way he barely spoke, the way he didn't want me in his garage for more than a few minutes. I tried to remember every detail of his face, his clothes, his hands. I remembered his nails, short, clean, but with tiny dark stains around the cuticles like grease or oil that wouldn't wash off. The longer I sat there, the more paranoid I felt. My bedroom door was open, and every little creak in the house made me tense up. I got out and shoved the false panel back in, stuffed the drawer into place, and pushed the whole dresser into the corner like I could hide it from myself. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured those photos, especially the ones where the women were smiling, completely unaware that someone was capturing them for God knows what reason. In the morning, I checked the Craigslist ad again, but it was gone. His phone number from our text was now disconnected. I drove by the address where I'd picked it up, and the house looked exactly the same, but the garage door was closed and there was no car in the driveway. When I got home, I couldn't bring myself to touch the dresser again. I just sat on the edge of my bed staring at it, wondering if I should pull the photos out and bring them to the police or if that would drag me into something I didn't want to be part of. I thought about the fact that he let me take the dresser so easily. If those photos were meant to stay hidden, why didn't he remove them first? Was it a mistake, or did he know I'd find them? That night, I moved the dresser into the spare room and closed the door. It's still in there. The photos are still in the hidden compartment. And I still haven't decided what to do with them. I've been trying to clear out my garage for months. Old shelves, busted chairs, random junk I didn't need. The biggest space waster was a big box of tools I hadn't touched in years. Socket sets, wrenches, a drill, even some heavy-duty stuff from when I helped my uncle renovate his house. Most of it was still in good shape, and I figured I could make a little cash. I put an ad up on Craigslist with some quick pictures and listed everything as a garage tool lot for cheap. Within a day, I got a reply from a guy saying he'd take the whole lot that was as described. He asked if he could come by that evening to check them out. I said sure. He texted when he was on the way, so I went to the garage to get everything ready. The sun was starting to go down, and the air had that late evening chill. I laid the tools out neatly on an old workbench so it looked organized. Sockets in rows, drill with a charger, everything clean. When he pulled up, it was an older dark SUV, a little beat up but nothing unusual. He got out, mid-40s maybe, jeans, plain hoodie, baseball cap. He gave a quick nod, glanced at the tools, and asked if he could take a closer look inside the garage since it was getting dark. I didn't think twice. I stepped back and let him walk in. As soon as he was inside, I heard the faintest squeak of hinges behind me. Not the front door, not the house. The garage door. I turned my head just enough to see another figure, shorter than the first guy, stepping in through the side entrance. No hello, no eye contact, just slowly pulling the door closed behind him until it clicked shut. Something in my stomach dropped. It wasn't just that there was another person. It was the way he moved. Slow, deliberate, like he was making sure the latch caught. He was wearing dark clothes, hood up, hands tucked in the pocket of his jacket. I tried to keep my face neutral, but my brain was racing. I glanced at the first guy, and he was still by the workbench, running his fingers along the tools without saying anything. The air of the garage suddenly felt heavier, like every sound was too loud. The hum of the fluorescent light, the faint tick of the cooling water heater. The second guy stepped further in and stood by the inside wall, still silent, just there. I realized then that the garage door remote was in the house, not in here with me. The main door was down. The side door was now shut. And I was standing between two men I didn't know in a space that didn't exactly have many exit options. The first guy finally looked up from the tools and smiled in a way that didn't match the situation. Not friendly, not even fake polite, just off. The second guy stayed near the wall, his eyes on me the entire time. I asked if they wanted to see anything in particular, trying to keep my voice steady. The first guy didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a small step back like he was giving space, but it just put me more in the middle of the room. That's when I noticed something else. There was no vehicle noise outside. No traffic. No voices. Just the low buzz of the light above us. I'd lived in this neighborhood long enough to know you could usually hear at least a car or two pass by on the main street. Not now. The silence was messing with my head, and I needed to do something. I walked over to the workbench, pretending to grab a tape measure so I could get closer to the side door. The second guy's eyes followed me the whole way. When I reached the bench, I made it look like I was bending down to check something under the tools. Instead, I kept my hand on the edge of the bench and angled my body toward the side door. My pulse felt like it was in my throat. I stood up quickly, muttered something about grabbing an extension cord from the shed, and took a step toward the door. The second guy didn't move, but his head turned slightly, just enough to track me. I pushed the door open faster than I think either of them expected. It swung wide, letting in the cool outside air. I stepped through and kept walking straight into the yard. My tone stayed casual, but my pace didn't slow until I was around the side of the house where I knew my phone was in my back pocket. I pulled it out and made it obvious I was calling someone. I didn't even say who, just started talking loud like someone was already on the other end. When I looked back, the first guy had come to the doorway, duffel bag in hand. The second guy was still in the garage, half in shadow. Neither of them said a word. After a few seconds, the first guy just shrugged, turned, and walked back through the garage towards the SUV. The second guy followed. They backed out of the driveway without looking at me, and a few moments later, the street was empty again. I stood there for a long time, phone still to my ear, pretending I was in a conversation. That night, I deleted my Craigslist post. I've done small modeling gigs before. Nothing serious, just local photographers trying to build their portfolio, the kind of shoots you find in Facebook groups or on bulletin boards at coffee shops. I'm not signed to an agency, and I've never done runway or anything high profile. Most of the time, it's just a quick afternoon thing, maybe $100, sometimes less. People warn you about Craigslist, that it's full of scams, creeps, or worse, and I believe them. But the truth is, some of the smaller casual gigs still pop up there. If you know what to look for, it can be a gold mine. Or at least, that's what I told myself. One night, I was scrolling, and an ad caught my eye. It was short but to the point, looking for fresh faces for an upcoming fashion shoot. No professional experience required. Paid same day. Cash. There were 3 example photos, all young women standing in fields or sitting on old wooden fences, natural light, soft colors, the kind of dreamy vintage aesthetic that blows up on Instagram. I sent a quick email with my name, a couple of pictures, and a note saying I had done a few casual shoots before. The reply came fast. His name was Mark, he said, and he thought my look was perfect for the bohemian theme he had in mind. He described the setting as a beautiful, secluded outdoor location, somewhere without distractions, where we could get real, authentic shots. When I asked where, he said it was at a nature reserve about 40 minutes outside the city. I'd never been there, but it didn't sound strange. I've shot in empty roads, back alleys, overgrown parks. Photographers love places where no one walks through their frame. The morning of the shoot, I texted to confirm. He replied with instructions to meet him at a gravel lot just off the main road, saying we'd hike a short distance to the actual spot. When I pulled in, his car was the only one there, an older gray sedan with fading paint and a dented bumper. He got out as soon as I parked. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Ball cap. Sunglasses, even though the sun was hiding behind thin clouds. Thin build, jeans, and a windbreaker. He had a black duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Not huge, but big enough to hold camera gear. He greeted me with a quick nod and said, "It's just a short walk." The wind was sharper than I expected, carrying that damp, earthy smell you get in deep woods. We started down a dirt path, wide at first but narrowing fast. Branches brushed my arms. Wet leaves stuck to my shoes. I kept expecting him to stop somewhere and set up, maybe pull out a camera, check the light. But he didn't. He just kept shifting the duffel bag from one shoulder to the other. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. I couldn't hear cars anymore or even distant voices. Just the wind through the trees. No other hikers. No animals. Just emptiness. Almost there, he said once without turning around. When we reached a clearing, I realized just how far we'd gone. The grass in the open space was tall and brittle, swaying in the wind. There were no benches, no picnic tables, nothing that looked like a designated park area. Mark set the duffel on a fallen log and unzipped it. I expected a camera, maybe a tripod, some lenses wrapped in cloth, a notebook with shot ideas. Instead, I saw a roll of duct tape, a bundle of heavy-duty zip ties, a pair of black gloves. That was it. My stomach tightened instantly, my brain scrambling to come up with innocent explanations. Maybe it was to secure equipment. Maybe he had something in another bag. But the thing was, there wasn't another bag. He didn't look at me while he pulled on the gloves. He took his time like he was in no rush, like he already knew we were alone out here. My heartbeat was loud enough that I thought he'd hear it. I forced my voice to sound casual. I forgot something in my card. Just give me a sec. He finally looked up at me. His face was unreadable, not angry, not surprised. Just still. I turned and started walking back toward the path, not running. Not yet. My whole body was screaming at me to move faster, but I knew running too soon could make things worse. The second the trees blocked his view, I sprinted. The path felt twice as long now. The air was colder, thinner. Every crunch of leaves behind me made me think he was following. My chest hurt from how fast I was breathing, but I didn't dare slow down. When the gravel lot finally came into view, my car looked impossibly far away. I ducked my keys from my pocket while I was still running, fumbling to hit the unlock button. The car alarm chirped loud and sharp in the empty air. I jumped in, slammed the locks, and started the engine without even closing the door fully first. My hands shook as I threw it into reverse. In the rearview mirror, I saw him emerge from the path. The duffel bag was still over his shoulder. He stopped at the edge of the lot and just stood there, watching me. He didn't shout, didn't wave, didn't move. I drove out of there so fast the gravel kicked up behind me in a cloud. By the time I got home, my phone buzzed. A notification from Craigslist. The ad was gone. The page read this posting has been deleted by its author. The next morning, I tried calling his number. It went straight to a recorded voice. This number is no longer in service. I kept thinking about how far from the road we were. How no one knew exactly where I had gone that day. How the only thing between me and whatever was in that bag was the thin thread of me deciding to leave when I did. And I don't think he ever planned to take photos. I'm just glad I never found out what the duct tape was really for. I wasn't even picky at that point. I just needed something that paid weekly so I could make rent. My fridge had been a graveyard for condiments for weeks, and my landlord had already started hinting at late fees. Craigslist was my last resort because every normal job site had me waiting weeks for replies that never came, if they replied at all. That's my solid post. It was short, plain, and almost too perfect. Warehouse help wanted. No experience needed. Cash paid weekly. Apply today, start tomorrow. No long list of requirements. No background check. Just a promise of quick work and quick pay. I filled out the form immediately. It only asked for my name, phone number, and a short note. I typed, available to work immediately. Ready for physical labor. Please call. Within an hour, my phone buzzed. A text. Hi, this is regarding the warehouse job. Can you come in today for an interview? The address was about 20 minutes away by bus. I copied it into Google Maps and saw it was in an industrial strip I'd never been to. Long rows of weathered buildings, old signage, and wide, cracked parking lots. The satellite view looked still. When I got there, the place was quieter than I expected. No trucks, no forklifts, not even the faint hum of machinery. Just a building with a glass front door, dark on the inside, like all the lights were off. The paint on the metal siding was faded and peeling in spots, and there was a lone plastic chair tipped over near the entrance. I almost turned around, but before I could, the door clicked open. A man stepped out, mid to late 40s, plain hoodie, baseball cap pulled low, hands in his pockets. His face was unreadable. You here for the job? He asked. I nodded and he tilted his head toward the doorway. Come on in. The second I stepped inside, the temperature dropped a few degrees. The light from outside faded quickly, leaving the space dim and shadowy. The only illumination came from a few high, dusty windows that let in streaks of pale daylight. The air smelled faintly of oil and something else. Sour, like spoiled food or stagnant water. He didn't talk much as we walked. Our footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Somewhere far off, I heard the slow drip, drip, drip of water. We passed closed metal doors on either side of the hallway. No labels, no windows, just solid gray slabs. I tried to glance through the gaps where the frames met the walls, but they were sealed tight. After what felt like too long, we reached a small room. Inside was a single metal table and 2 chairs. A lone light bulb dangled overhead, swinging slightly, making faint shadows ripple across the walls. "Have a seat," he said. "I'll grab the paperwork." I sat. He stepped out, and the heavy metal door closed behind him. Then I heard it, the sound of a bolt sliding into place. Not just the soft click of a latch. A thunk. Heavy. Final. My stomach tightened. I stood and turned toward the door. No handle on my side. Just smooth metal. "Hello," I called. My voice sounded too loud in the small room. It bounced back at me like I was in a concrete box. That's when I noticed there was nothing in the room except the table and chairs. No papers. No pens. No signs this was an interview space. The walls were raw, unpainted concrete. In the far corner was a vent, maybe a foot wide, its grate coated in dust. I told myself not to panic. Maybe it was just how things worked here. Maybe the guy didn't want interruptions. Maybe. Then the dripping stopped. And in the silence, I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, hitting closer. They stopped outside the door. Something scraped against the metal, not like the bolt being undone, but slower, like metal dragging against metal. My breath caught. And nothing. Just silence. I don't know how long I stood there before my body finally kicked into gear. I went to the vent and knelt down. The screws were rusty, but when I twisted one, it gave way easily, too easily. One by one, I pulled them out with shaking fingers until the grate came free. The gap behind it was cramped and filthy, but it led somewhere. I slid in, my clothes catching on the rough edges, dust filling my nose. The narrow shaft went straight for a few feet before splitting into 2 paths. One sloped upward. I took that one. It felt like forever before I saw faint light ahead. Another grate. I crawled toward it, peering into the room beyond. This one wasn't empty. Old boxes were stacked in one corner, some split open to reveal yellowing paper and torn fabric. A chair lay on its side, one leg broken. In the far corner, what looked like a pile of coats. Except some of them had shoes still attached. My skin went cold. I kicked at the grate until it popped loose and clattered to the floor. I dropped down, my legs shaking from the impact. I didn't stop to look again. I ran to the first door I saw, locked. The second door opened into another hallway. At the far end, I saw daylight leaking around the frame of a door. I sprinted for it, my footsteps loud against the concrete. The door was heavy, but it moved under my weight, swinging outward to reveal a narrow alley between 2 buildings. The air smelled fresher out here, but I didn't slow down until I could see the street. I walked fast and faster until I was half jogging toward the bus stop. I didn't look back. When I finally sat down at the stop, my hands were so shaking. I pulled out my phone. The man's number was still there in my messages. I called. A robotic voice answered, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." I went back to Craigslist. The posting was gone. Not even an expired label. Just gone. I don't know what was really happening in that building, but I know one thing. There was never a warehouse job. And whatever that man had planned for me in that locked room, I was never supposed to walk back out. I thought I'd scored the best deal of my life. It was one of those late-night Craigslist searches where you're half asleep but still scrolling because you're desperate. My lease was ending, I couldn't stay with my ex any longer, and every apartment I looked at was either tiny, disgusting, or way out of my budget. Then I saw it. A big room in a nice neighborhood for a price that made no sense. It wasn't fancy, but the photo showed a decent kitchen, a sunny window in the bedroom, and clean hardwood floors. I immediately got a reply within an hour and set up a viewing for the next morning. When I showed up, The guy who answered the door looked like he'd just rolled out of bed. Baggy t-shirt, hair sticking out, holding a mug of coffee. He introduced himself and said he was a current tenant moving out because he was relocating for work. He seemed kind of casual about it all, like he didn't really care who moved in as long as they paid rent. The landlord couldn't make it, but supposedly trusted him to handle the showing. The place looked fine. A little messy. Dishes in the sink, laundry on the couch, but nothing alarming. He told me I could move in at the start of the month, handed me the landlord's email, and said to send a deposit there. It felt a little rushed, but I convinced myself it was just a lucky find. Fast forward 2 weeks, I've got my stuff in boxes and I move in. He was still there, but he said he was wrapping things up and waiting on his new place to be ready. He was friendly enough, even offered me some of his leftover groceries. I figured we'd be overlapping for a week, maybe 2, no big deal. But 2 weeks turned into 3. His stuff wasn't packed. His clothes were still in the closet in the hall. He still had his toiletries in the bathroom. Every night I'd hear the TV in his room until 3 or 4 a.m., and in the mornings he'd be in the kitchen like he'd never left. When I asked about his new place, he'd mumble something about delays or the landlord screwing him over. I started feeling like I was a guest in his home instead of the other way around. The weird part was how comfortable he was. Too comfortable. He'd leave his bedroom door wide open, just sitting in there scrolling his phone or watching TV like he didn't have a move-out date hanging over him. If I brought friends over, he'd insert himself into conversations and make them uncomfortable. He always seemed to be watching me. Not in a creepy over way, but I'd catch him lingering in the hall when I walked to the bathroom, or he'd just be sitting at the kitchen table when I got home, staring like he'd been waiting. About a month in, I finally emailed the landlord to ask what was going on. That's when everything flipped. The email bounced back. I tried the number he gave me. Disconnected. I searched the address on Google, and that's when I found out the actual landlord's contact info. I called, explained who I was, and she sounded completely confused. She told me she hadn't rented the place to anyone new, and there was no notice of a tenant moving out. The guy I'd been living with. He wasn't even on the lease. My stomach dropped. The landlord said she'd been trying to evict him for months because he'd stopped paying rent. Apparently, he'd been dodging notices and refusing to leave. She didn't even know I was there. I realized then that I'd given my deposit, a pretty big chunk of my savings, straight to him, not her. I didn't even know how to bring it up to him without feeling unsafe. From that day, I stopped talking to him unless I had to. I started locking my bedroom door at night. Things got tense fast. He noticed I wasn't as friendly and started making little comments like, "We're not talking now," or "You're acting different." And then he started leaving his bedroom door open when he was getting dressed, like he was trying to make me uncomfortable on purpose. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of my door handle rattling. It stopped after a few seconds, but I lay there completely still, listening to footsteps moving down the hall. I didn't sleep at all after that. After that, I started staying out as late as I could. I'd come home to find my stuff slightly moved. My laptop in a different position, my laundry basket pushed to the side. Nothing big enough to prove, but enough to make my skin crawl. The last straw came when I walked into the kitchen one morning and found my cereal poured into a bowl with milk, just sitting there on the table. I hadn't made it. He was standing by the sink, smirking, and said nothing. I grabbed my bag, left, and started looking for another place immediately. When I finally found somewhere else and came back to pack, half my food was gone and my pillow was missing. I didn't even want to think about it. I moved out that day without saying a word to him. A week later, I got an email from the actual landlord saying he'd finally been removed from the property. She didn't say how and I didn't ask. I still don't know what his deal was, but I can't stop thinking about how easily I could just stay there, letting him push the boundaries a little more every day. I haven't touched Craigslist since.